Thank you for coming to the inauguration of the Native Seed Library. And a big thank you to Sandra, our library director. I know I'm to Packard, and I'm in the library board and also on the, a member of the Seed Library Stewards. And in fact, without the energetic energy of our team and their varied skills and talents, the Seed Library, which is a natural outgrowth of the Green Wagon project, would not have been possible. So the Seed Library team, I would like all of you to stand up so that you all know. A big shout out to Kate Dawson and Ellie Dawson and the Girl Scouts. They created the amazing display that you see downstairs and here, including our traveling seed card catalog, seed collecting box, seed forms, egg cartons, the whole works. I mean, this is the Girl Scouts, and we're so lucky to have you guys in our community. Thank you. And for Kelsey, where's Kelsey?
She's greeting.
You're greeting people.
Well, anyway, even though Kelsey's not here, she is essential in this too. She created the gorgeous flyers about the Seed Library, and more will come, and other information literature. And Beth Staley leads our education team. She's assembled 47 pages of native plant descriptions, with more coming, and she's also a major provider of our native seeds. And Julie Smith, her energy and dedication in growing our green community has helped bring us all together. Will House, who manages the seed collection and monitors the emails to the Food Library Stewards, if you have any questions. And Julie Powell, who unfortunately is not here because she's at a Master Gardener's workshop, good for her, but she is a maker of the gorgeous plant labels. So that's a team, but not least, our community partner, Transition Town Greater Media, and thanks to their design team, Maureen, and with help from Shari, we got a beautiful logo, which you'll see on the tablecloth downstairs. And hopefully in the near future, a web page where we can share information about garden design and growing native plants. Now, our speakers will talk about the most important things new native plant gardeners will be mindful of, should be mindful of when starting out. How to, the most resilient natives for our area, how to garden to preserve species and habitat, common mistakes to avoid, and not least, design tips to dispel the myth that native plants are all wildly informal. So let me introduce the speakers now. Lisa McDonald Hanes is a founding partner of 10 Landscape Architects and co-owner of Redbud Plant, and I think many of you know Redbud, love Redbud. She's a registered landscape architect in New York and New Jersey and Pennsylvania. Lisa practices with a land ethic informed by her family's farming heritage. With over 20 years of professional work with landscapes, Lisa's focus is on fostering connections between people and their environments and improving quality of life by altering how we perceive, use, and care for landscapes. Educated at Purdue University with a Bachelor's of Science in Landscape Architecture, Lisa has worked with community groups, municipal agencies, design professionals, and private homeowners in cultivating landscapes like our health depends on it. Lisa will talk about what you need to know before starting about garden design, soil life, and so on. And Donna Cusano has spent most of her adult life as a professional artist, earning a BFA from the Tyler School of Art. In the mid-1990s, she had the opportunity to paint outdoors on a farm and found she loved the immediacy of responding to changing light and shadow patterns. By 2010, she was ready for her next professional chapter. She earned her permaculture design certification in 2013, completed classes in organic gardening, worked in an organic farm. She also took landscape design classes at Longwood Garden, and in 2019, she felt the call to start her own company. And Donna Gardens is her new art studio in which she combines her artistic design skills with her passion to take care of the planet, and that's what we're all here for too. Donna will highlight the most resilient native plants in our garden. And since childhood, Linda Coulston has been interested in gardening and science. Over the years, she's championed environmental issues, focused on the preservation of species and habitat. In 2013, she became a Penn State Master Gardener, completed her certification in ecological gardening at Mount Cuba. Recently, she's been volunteering at Tyler to establish an educational moss bed. And in 2022, she led a successful initiative to make Media Borough a Xerces Society Bee City, USA. She and other volunteers, many of whom are now in this room, helped design and now maintain a pollinator garden on borough property. Linda and her husband, Rich, has earned several awards for their spectacular native woodland gardens. And Linda will talk about the joy of gardening for wildlife and habitat. And after they speak, there'll be a Q&A period, so we ask you to hold your questions until then. And Julie Smith will be the timekeeper.
Thanks for coming out. I'm Lisa, and I do have some notes, but I'm going to try not to read at you. So begin by beginning. Yes, you're going to do some research. Yes, you want to do things thoughtfully, but don't hold yourself back from just beginning, because definitely gardening is a lot of experimentation. You're going to learn as you go, and we'll talk about some ways to kind of start simply. So when you're working with the natural world, there's not necessarily hard and fast rules. Like I said, it's a living thing, so you can't treat it like a widget, like a manufactured thing. Sometimes people come into Redbud and they say, I want a plant that does this, this, and this, but it's only 2 feet wide, and it's like, it doesn't exist. So sometimes we have to be a little forgiving, like we're working with a natural beings, in the natural world. So, like I said, be easy on yourself, but know what you're working with. One way to really begin is like this, talking with other gardeners. We have so many resources in our area, whether it's all the public gardens that we have, the garden clubs. Definitely that's a great way to be a beginner gardener. Start talking with other gardeners. Like the Green Wagon, start sharing with other gardeners. Give them a plant, take a plant, learn from those other experiences. You have a wealth of resource. Anybody know the Mount Cuba Center, Mount Cuba Garden in Delaware? Mount Cuba, it's in Coulston, Delaware. That's a great public garden that's all about native plants. That's their focus. They have a great website, they have great classes, so things like that are a great way to begin. Also, know yourself and know your goals. So, if you tend to make your project a little bit too big, or if you, tend to not make your project big enough, think about that a little bit, study yourself a little bit as you begin to think about the garden project. Sometimes I encourage people to start small. Even though you maybe know that you want a big transformation, maybe for the first year, start a little bit smaller so you can get a little bit of a win under the belt and get a little bit of experience. Know how you're going to fit this new activity into your life. Also, once you kind of think about, knowing yourself, realize what you want your ultimate goal to be, and then you can start to prepare and step back into priorities and steps. Start to form your goals. The goals might be, I want less lawn. I want to attract more pollinators and bees. I want my garden to be habitat, so start to make your goals. Could be just that you want more beauty. When you start to think about your goals, understand what your bigger picture is going to be. Sometimes I encourage people to kind of do a roadmap. You may know that you kind of want to get to California, but you know that you need to have 3 different stops along the way. So start to think about your garden plan a bit like you would plan out a big trip and a big roadmap. Know that maybe you're going to start the first year on just this little corner of the front yard, and don't overwhelm yourself with trying to do the whole thing right up front. You can kind of make it into sections, make it into year 1, year 2, things like that. That may help you, again, learn as you go. I want to maybe challenge you a little bit to challenge some of the American ideas of what a good garden is. We have a lot that we've taken on from England, you know, the lawn and the hedges. Maybe push back a little bit against this and maybe think about what's just convention, maybe what you grew up with, what your parents did, what your neighbors have done. But start maybe questioning some of those things as you think about your larger roadmap and your larger goals. You know, you don't have to have, you know, that much lawn, right? Or, you know, that could be something you question. Or all shrubs and don't have to be turned into a trimmed hedge, you know, things like that. So maybe start to challenge some of those things that you maybe have just taken as this is what you do and this is what a good garden looks like. Think about that a little bit. You can always do what's called cues of care, and that just means maybe you decide to keep the edge really trim and tidy. But I know that a lot of people can tend to think that native plant gardens are messy because they're wild. That's all about maintenance. It's all about how you show the care. So a native plant garden doesn't have to look wild and messy. Part of that can be the design, plant selection, and the arrangement, but it also can be about how you maintain it. And you can think about, you know, edges being a little bit more maintained than something that's a little bit out of view, a little bit away from, you know, edges that the neighbors are going to see. Understand also, not all bugs are bad, but also like what's kind of when have you hit a critical point. So if you've read the Doug Tallamy books or heard about Doug Tallamy, he talks about the 10-step program or approach where, you know, if you start to think like, oh, I saw a little bug, you know, on that plant, take 10 steps back, you know, from the plant, and is 50% of the plant, you know, harmed, affected? Kind of understand like a threshold. A lot of times when you see something like an aphid, you think, oh no, like I would say that that's like maybe a traditional American gardener thing. Oh no, I see something, I better, you know, go and figure out how to attack it. But maybe when you see the aphids, wait a little bit and the ladybugs are gonna come. So this is part of those things that I'll ask you to question a little bit. Start to understand what you're working with. So draw your project area. So this is a very simple thing, and we can pass it around, or I can leave it, you can come look at it. Just graph paper, pencil doesn't have to be complicated. You could do this, you know, in a computer program. I had a client do this in Excel. I have no idea how they did it in Excel. You can do it any way that works for you, but this is just graph paper and colored pencil. So you just start to get your tape measure out. You can work with a friend to do it, drawing just things in 2 different directions so that you can understand this bed that you really want to build is really, you know, 10 feet by 12 feet. Once you start to get those measurements, that's really going to help you begin your planning process. So start with making yourself a project map, and then start to look at, you know, which direction is north. That's going to start to understand where the sun and shade patterns are coming from, where you're going to get those strong winter winds, things like that. So when you do the plan, it's not only about dimensions, it's about understanding, you know, which direction is north. Also, where things are going to cast shade. Is the house going to cast shade, you know, this far? Is that big tree casting shade, you know, about this distance, things like that. Understand where you have windows and doors, whether the windows are about where you want to make a view or screen a view, doors and circulation, so you can understand like the access routes. Also, so you can start to begin to understand thresholds. You know, if you want to like mark a threshold, you know, maybe after you know, get out of the car on the driveway, you don't want to just feel like the driveway and the garden, you know, are just open to each other. Maybe you want to screen the driveway. Maybe you want to kind of make that threshold so that you kind of like leaving the day behind a little bit as you enter the peaceful garden, things like that. So that would be about noticing doors, gates, understand the circulation. Also start to understand the slope. How is the ground moving? That's going to form your understanding of how the water is moving across your site. You can also start to understand how steep the slope is, if that's going to affect what plant you select for that, or if that's going to cause challenges in maintenance if the slope is really steep, something like that. any significant vegetation that you really want to mark. So on this plan, there were some, there's a tree and some significant shrubs, so you maybe want to mark that. Even if you think, oh, I'm ultimately going to take that out, go ahead and mark that on your plan so you can kind of have that in your sequence of work. Okay, as you begin to analyze, once you've done your project map, think about your sun and shade patterns. Full sun is more than 6 hours of sun for the day. That's obviously changing. We have lower light in the winter, but think about it kind of where the sun is at, March through September, and where you're getting 6 hours of sun, I would call that full sun. Where you're getting about 3 to 4, I would call that part sun. And where you get direct sunlight for less than 3 hours a day, I would call that pretty good shade. Understand your soil. You can always send in a soil test, but you could begin with just put your hands in your soil. See what that'll tell you a lot about the texture, what you feel. If you can grab your soil and form it into a ball, and if you can kind of make a ribbon by pushing it, this probably has a lot of clay content in it. If your soil is holding water after a rain event, might have a lot of clay in it. So yeah, you could definitely send it off for a soil test, and that'll give you a lot more information, like pH, like percentage of organic matter. Those would be 2 things to make sure that you check the box for if you send off the soil test. But you could also run a lot by just touching it, watching it after a rain. Once you know your, I don't think that we did a resource page, right? I don't think we did that as a handout. Anyway, 2 different places you could send your soil for a soil test. I like the Cornell lab. If you Google Cornell soil cache, you get a little bit more biology information from the Cornell lab. There's different selections that you can select when you fill out your form for them. You can also just send it into Penn State. But yeah, definitely key to begin with, I would say, is soil texture. That's like sand, clay, loam content, and organic matter content, and pH. Those are the basics you're going to want to know. So when you're, again, still finishing out the analysis, we've done sun and shade, we've done topography, we've done the soil, we are kind of analyzing the existing plant material. We're kind of looking at it, whether you like the quality of it, whether you think it maybe needs some pruning, things like that. You kind of analyze the existing vegetation that's there. Is it more mature and established? Is it new? If you notice any disease or pest associated with it, do you think it's in good health? Is it aging out? Things like that. And then also be aware of the animals that may be around, whether that's pets or different wildlife that come through. Definitely deer and rabbit are going to have to be something that you're cognizant of up front when you're either selecting plants or wanting to get a fence, things like that. Start to think about where those views are. Again, I think I said this earlier, views that you may have out from inside out, where where a window is. Start marking those where you want to create an interesting view or block a view. Think about different vantage points of views from the outside, whether that's how you're moving through your landscape and experiencing it, or how others are from the outside. Start to think about character. What's the character now? And how do you want to shift that? That's kind of back to your goals. What's the character of the garden that you ultimately want to get to? This could be a bit like kind of establishing a mood board, for yourself, whether that's digital or cutting things out and it's physical. You can get that from different books and publications, things that you download from online, but then you're also going to get that from visiting Mount Cuba, other places like that. Go to other gardens, whether that's just going on a garden tour or things like that. So start to understand the character that you ultimately want to reach and the purpose of why you're doing this. Is it about sustainability? Is it about wildlife? Is it about pollinators? Is it just about beauty? Start to kind of rank that for yourself, and that's going to get you back to what you want to do, priority year 1, versus year 3, versus your ultimate roadmap, your ultimate destination. I'm just going to hit the highlights here because I've got less than 2 minutes left. Think about the approach of the garden. Garden design is not interior design. It's not going to be done ever. And you have to plan for change. Gardens are dynamic. They're always growing. You can't, as much as you want to, your 4-year-old can't be 4 years old forever, right? they're gonna grow. Same with the garden. You have to plan on being dynamic, plan on it changing. Trying to hold a garden static is a lot of work. So that'll lessen your maintenance once you kind of allow for flexibility, allow for it to change. So know that as your approach. Think about scale. Think about putting in your structure first. That might be thinking about putting in the shrubs and the trees that are going to take a long time to grow, kind of getting that structure in. The other thing I would say, if you're a new gardener starting out, if you want to do experimentation and get that easy win, maybe just start with perennials and grasses, ornamental grasses. So you can kind of decide that again with your goal. Do you want to go ahead and get that foundation, the structure in there? Do you want that quick win? Perennials and grasses are cheaper, easier to move around if you decide that you don't like where they are. You can also, just since we're talking about seed starting today, you can think about whether you want to plan on time or plan on budget. Do you want to start with seeds? Do you want to start with small plants? Easier to put in, easier to experiment with, lower on the budget. But there's going to be maintenance in between. You're going to have to do more weeding if you're spacing things out for their mature, ultimate mature size when you're leaving open soil in there. Think about layering. Maybe you want to put in some green mulch, so that's ground cover. If you put in smaller plants and you don't want to just leave that open ground, then you're going to have to weed. Think about some sacrificial ground cover that as that plant matures and starts to shade it out, maybe it sacrifices a little bit, but you could think about density from the beginning, smaller plants or bigger plants from the beginning, how that works out with how much your maintenance is going to be required, and then how the budget's going to play out with that. Okay, and then we already talked about entrances and thresholds. Am I out of time? I didn't get to all the design things. If you've got questions on that, we'll get to that.
Thank you.
So my name is Donna Cusano, and I own a company called Terra Donna Gardens. We are based out of Media. We design, we install, and we maintain mostly native gardens. So I use the word mostly because sometimes there's a non-native that works well. But I would say about 80% of what we plant is native. So today I'm going to talk about hardiness and resilience. Can anyone think of a criteria that would make a plant hardy or considered hardy?
Cold hardiness.
There's cold hardiness, that's a good one, right?
Drought resistance.
Drought, yeah, I'm going to talk about that. How about one of the things that Lisa mentioned, which is, have you done a soil test, right? So what kind of soil do we mostly have in our area? Who said clay? Yeah, clay. Right, so we've already hit two of the criteria I'm going to talk about, drought resistance and clay tolerance. I'm not going to call it resistance. Actually, I'm gonna shift from using the word resistant to tolerant, because in our ever-changing climate, what's resistant today may not be resistant next year or the year after. And then there's one more criteria I'm going to talk about, and it has more to do with visitors to our garden. So what visitor to our garden would you say is the most destructive?
Deer.
Who has deer? Who doesn't have deer? Anyone not? That's good. Good for you. Yeah, well, we envy you. All right. But I'm going to backtrack a little bit and talk about planting hardiness zones. Does anyone know what the hardiness zones are?
Yeah.
Just go ahead and popcorn.
7.
Shout it out.
7. 7A.
We're in
What?
7A, right. So what does that mean?
That means that you don't want to buy a plant that's only tolerant in zone 8 or zone 2.
Or zone 2, right. So these zones run laterally across our country. And we used to be in 6B.
Yes.
And that was last year. And now all of a sudden we're in 7A. So what's happening is the heat is moving up. So it's really important to think about a plant that can tolerate what we now have are these huge shifts in temperature, right? So we had a day that was 9 degrees the other day, or maybe that was the wind chill. And then we'll have a day that's 100 degrees, right? So that's a pretty big, amount of temperature shift from one to the other. So the plants have to be able to tolerate all of these changes. And then the other thing is what we call the geological soil content. So we are in what's called the Piedmont uplands. And the Piedmont region runs all throughout Appalachia, and there's a little bit that goes like up into Connecticut. But basically, it's what used to be a mountain range and now has eroded into what they call the uplands. So we're above sea level, but our soil content is very particular to this part of the country, the eastern part of the country. The Piedmont uplands used to be forested. It used to be dense woodland, and because of what factors in particular have made these changes? Can anyone? Yeah, just suburban sprawl, yeah. Well, the glaciers were part of that original kind of, geological makeup, right? But since the glaciers have gone away, we now have, we do have topsoil, naturally occurring topsoil. What would make the topsoil? Why would we even have topsoil? Decomposing matter, right, yeah. So the leaves come down and they decompose, or branches fall. Pine needles come down and they decompose. So that's what makes a layer of topsoil. And can you imagine when, say about 250 years ago, there would have been not inches of topsoil, there would have been feet of topsoil. There would have been a foot or 2 or maybe 3 feet of topsoil.
Boy, that's beautiful garden work.
Yeah, but now we have clay, right? So why do we have clay? You might think of why most of where we dig in our suburban lawns ends up being clay.
Farming?
No.
Farming?
Farming is one, right? So where we live used to be farms, and the farms, that soil was churned and then sometimes eroded. There's actually a economic reason why we have clay.
Construction.
Construction, take it further. What happens when they build a new house?
They raise everything. They dig everything out. It's
Yeah.
all gone.
They strip the topsoil off and they sell it to a company that puts it in bags and sells it back to us.
Take our topsoil.
Got it? So when you dig and you see that orangey red color of soil, you basically what you have is subsoil. Okay, so why am I going through all this? Because subsoil or clay is actually very high in pH. So it's somewhere between 8 and 10 on the pH scale. Neutral pH is somewhere between 5.5 and 6.5. And then acidic is somewhere between, say, 6 and 4, right? So when you start planning your garden and choosing your plants, if you really want a plant to be hardy, you want it to be able to thrive somewhere between neutral pH and alkaline. Because if you choose a plant, who can think of a plant that wants acidic soil? Rhododendron. What else? What was that? Strawberry. Well, blueberry. Blueberries want high acidity. So anything where you've been told, well, you've got to add sulfur. You've got to give that plant sulfurs, and you want to lower that pH. But if you don't want to worry about all of that, again, I'm talking about hardiness. So put it in the ground. Most likely, it's going to thrive, or at least survive, right? So you want plants that can tolerate clay, plants that can tolerate drought, and plants that can tolerate deer pressure. So we already talked about soil a little bit, and again, do your research. The soil is fascinating. I'm not a scientist, but I really love soil science. So what's deer tolerance? What does that even mean, right? If I'm a deer and I'm hungry, and it's February, and I really haven't had much to eat for the last few months. What am I gonna nibble on, and what am I not gonna nibble on, right? So basically, deer tolerance is anything that's unpalatable to deer. They just don't like how it tastes, or it's not providing much nutrition for them, okay? Now, I have a big old asterisk next to my word deer tolerance. Why do I have a big old asterisk? They'll try it. I watched a video of a fawn eating an American holly. Just saying. Now, the fawn is going to try anything. The mature deer might go, you don't really want to eat that, but you can try it, just like any kid, right, who's going to try stuff and then learns. But the caveat or the asterisk is that I have seen gardens where they've planted echinacea, and if you haven't bought this book yet, this is the Deer-Resistant Plants. Greg Tepper was actually a guest speaker at Redbud at the end of November, I think. So he and Ruth Rogers Coulston wrote this book and put this list together, but not every plant made my list. And one plant in particular is in here that we all love, echinacea. I have seen deer absolutely decimate an area of echinacea. And I've seen them decimate rudbeckia, and I've seen them decimate, shoot, I'm drawing a blank. But anyway, you get my point, right? So just because they didn't eat it this year doesn't mean they might not try it next year, and so on and so forth. Drought tolerance. What makes something drought tolerant? Plant's ability to thrive or tolerate conditions where moisture content is low due to minimal rain. We do have our droughts around here. Or the soil's minimal ability to absorb water, i.e., what kind of soil? Clay. So it holds the water, but it doesn't drain. So if let's say you want to build a rain garden, and the idea is to have it drain into the rain garden and then drain out. Well, at some point, that water is just going to sit there. And maybe the plants that you've put in the garden really don't like to sit in water. But some plants are okay with it, at least for a period of time. All right, so this is my little caveat here. The above criteria does not take into account light conditions, okay? So this list, I will call out plants where, especially for those of you who has shade, who has a lot of shade in their garden. Yeah, so a lot of us do. So I'll call that out and say, y'all with shade, go ahead and listen. Doesn't take into account sun, shade, or part shade. Do your research on the best light conditions for each plant type and species. I am going to talk about ground covers. All the ground covers that I mentioned are perennial, just so you know. And some of them are actually evergreen, which is super cool. Okay, so let's get into the list. This is a pretty short list. Okay, there's not a lot of plants on this, right? So the other piece of criteria is that I've used them, I've tried them, I've experimented, and they've all done pretty darn well. Here's another piece of information. Who here really likes to learn the nomenclature, the Latin terms? Not many of you.
I've been attempting it.
So here's my wish for all of you. So I used to resist learning the Latin, and now I actually love saying things like polysticum acrosticoides, right? I mean, isn't that fun when you actually learn it? So my advice to you is to learn the botanical names, because there's no question about what you're talking about. With common names, sometimes the common name, there's one plant might have 5 different common names, okay? So this is under ground covers. I will also mention the common name. There's 2 ferns. So again, y'all with shade, you got northern lady fern, Erythrium esplendoides, and you also have Christmas fern. Again, polysticum acrosticoides. Great plants. I've seen them. No, deer don't eat them. I've put them under oak trees that suck all the moisture out, and they've done very, very well. Any of the calyxes, except for those that, and sedges, right? Sedges, any of the sedges where moisture is not required. Okay, so most of them are tolerant. Particularly Carex pentavonica and Carex socialis, because each of their blades gets really, really long, and so they basically carpet the ground. Packard aurea, which is also called golden ragwort, it's fantastic. It spreads, but again, if you've got an area where it's shady and you just want something to go, highly recommend that plant. So now we're about Tiarella cordifolia, also called foam flower. The cordifolia species actually does spread by runners underground, and so if you plant, let's say you put 10 in the ground, in a couple of years you're going to have 15 or you're going to have 20. So that's one of the great things about ground covers, is they generally tend to propagate themselves. And then for sun, we have Ruellia, which is a wild petunia. Pretty tolerant of just about all the criteria that I've mentioned. There's a salvia, lyre-leaf sage, which is fantastic, especially for areas where the ground has been disturbed. So like the edge of a driveway where you've got a lot of salt and you've got, maybe just really crappy soil, you can put it in there. Okay, let's get some grasses in here. So Lisa mentioned starting with grasses because it's pretty much a win every time. However, there's some that I like more than others. So what made my list is Panicum virgatum, which is switchgrass. Oh, 2 minutes, thank you. I'll keep moving. Little blue stem, and Indian grass, which is not the usual thing to plant, but it's absolutely fantastic. All right, y'all want to hear about the perennials because I know that's pretty much why we're here. Agastache, or anise hyssop in the perennial. I put it everywhere and it has always thrived. Butterfly weed, Asclepias tuberosa. It does better in poor soil than it does in rich soil. The Coreopsis has a asterisk because I've seen deer eat the Coreopsis, and some Coreopsis get funguses, so you have to watch that. Eryngium eucifolium, which is also called rattlesnake master. Again, you can put it pretty much anywhere in the sun and it'll be fine. Lyratris spicata is another one, although you have to give it some time to establish before it becomes drought tolerant. Mountain mint. Who likes to plant mint? Mountain mint is native. It's super easy to maintain, even if you have to pull some out because it's spreading, and it does do well in shade, and it's not quite as aggressive in shade. All right, let's get to some shrubs. American beautyberry. You really do need to water it the first season, but after maybe 2 or 3 seasons, it's pretty much drought tolerant and it can take sun and shade. And all of these, by the way, are deer resistant, so that's just go ahead and make that assumption. Carolina allspice, my new favorite shrub. They actually planted them in the garden on Broome Street. There's a whole row of them, fantastic. Red osier dogwood, or red twig dogwood, is another really great one. Again, you have to establish it by watering it the first couple of seasons, but after that, it should be good to go. Let's see, arrowwood viburnum. Of all the viburnums, the arrowwood is probably the most hardy. And then I'm also going to mention 2 trees. They're both oak trees. We really do need to be planting more oak trees. Oak trees can support 500 to 2,300 different species of bugs. 2,300 species of bugs. So oak trees are the king, basically. Quercus alba, white oak, more resistant to the funguses that are currently, well, if you haven't noticed, we've lost a lot of red oak trees and a lot of pin oaks in our little town. So we can replant with white oak. And then bur oak, Quercus macrocarpa, is another really hardy and resistant tree, both again in the white tree or the white oak family. So if you have specific questions, we've got the Q&A afterwards, but I thank you very much for listening and learn your nomenclature.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to see so many faces in here and new gardeners. My name is Linda Coulston. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about how your garden can preserve the pollinators that are coming to visit. So now that you've planned and perhaps planted your wonderful garden and you begin to enjoy the beauty of your creation, you'll most likely be surprised at the array of winged creatures and crawling creatures that have come to visit. You're beginning to create a natural habitat. So what does that mean? Caterpillars and other insects, solitary bees, for example, often tuck themselves away in places that would be perfectly safe in an unmanaged forest or meadow. But that's different. It's more dangerous for them in your garden because of the people that are spraying, the visitors who are coming in and out and mowing, and even your presence there, taking care of your garden. Dead matter like fallen leaves, tree trunks that are left are great habitats for pollinators, and actually dead tree trunks, or snags as they're often called, provide more habitat and more food sources than many living trees and plants.
That's good.
Luna moths, for example, and I have something up there on the board, bind leaves together to make sort of a cocoon for the winter. So a good reason not to grind up leaves and put them out is that you're actually killing a lot of the insects that tend to hibernate over the winter. And as many of you may have noticed, we're seeing fewer and fewer pollinators. Monarch butterflies seem to be rare this summer. I have a fairly not a large pollinator garden, but fairly active one in most years, and I didn't see any monarchs this year in our garden. Dead leaves help to hide cocoons from hungry animals that are searching around. The squirrels and the birds, of course, will be looking for caterpillars. They survive, baby birds survive on caterpillars, and without caterpillars, there wouldn't be any baby birds. Like our human babies, we need soft food when we're little. We can't eat steak and potatoes for dinner. They also need caterpillars. Mulch piles in the woods, rather than burning or throwing leaves away, can help. So moving your leaves to a place I know some of you have very small gardens and it's very hard to keep piles of leaves, but raking them into a small pile versus blowing them or using leaf blowers, which tend to crunch up the leaves and maybe kill the pollinators that are nesting in them for the winter, is a good idea. So consider leaving like dry stems and leaves. There's an exhibit over there of hollow stems. Many of the native bees, which are about the size of gnats, you may find a little insect on your skin in the summertime just walking around, and it's actually not a gnat, it's a native bee. And it's just taking the minerals out of your skin as nutrients. Lawn chemicals, I'd like to address a little bit of that. I know that's sort of a little off the subject of planting and native gardens, but it's very important. More than 80% of pollinators, bees, butterflies, and hummingbirds reproduce in areas like your pollinator gardens and in the woods. If you lose pollinators in your garden, you may get a lower yield of the seeds that you're trying to save to replant. And in your vegetable garden, you may have lower productivity of the fruits and vegetables that you're trying to grow. Even worse, the loss of pollinators sets up a domino effect. So if you're not seeing them in your garden, it may be because they're using mosquito sprays and other kinds of chemicals in other gardens that are drifting, and they're killing the pollinators there, so it affects overall the mass of pollinators. Also, plants that you're putting in your garden, a good thing is that you're providing the ability to pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, so you're cleaning the air with your pollinator garden, whether it's a small patio garden with a few plants or a massive garden that takes up 1/4 of an acre. So you're really helping to clean the air and the environment. The hazards of lawn chemicals. Studies have shown that they're drifting into our homes. So if you have open windows, and some of us have experienced that. Has anybody experienced sprays coming into the windows or on their property? It can be, it can contaminate indoor air quality as well if you have your doors and windows open. And exposing children to these chemicals can be toxic to children. It's neurotoxic to children as well. And they can track those chemicals in. If you're treating your lawn, they can track them into the house. They're also toxic to animals, cats to some degree and dogs to some degree. They can cause cancer and liver diseases. 24 of the chemicals used in lawns and sprays are neurotoxic, and 24 are disruptive to the endocrine system. So those are things to be aware of when you plant your garden, is to try to keep it clean and messy and avoid some of the chemicals. There's some natural things that you can do. So who knows some natural things to do with to prevent mosquitoes and
Dunks.
Mosquito dung.
great.
What?
Mosquito dumps. So there's a bucket out there that we're that's in the drawing, and it's called a mosquito bucket of doom. So we fill it with a little bit of water and some straw or leaves and a mosquito dump, and you let it sit there and fester for a while, and it becomes like a swamp. And the mosquitoes say, "This is a really great place to lay our eggs." And in my experience, where I have them in our garden, is that I have some mosquitoes buzzing around like mad, and it means that they're finding that place to lay their eggs. And it's about 95% effective in killing mosquitoes. The larvae hatch, and the mosquitoes the mosquito larvae can't survive what's in the bucket. Oh, phew. So these are mosquito dunks, and this is the little pellet. It's called Bacillus thuringiensis. That's the technical name, and it's ubiquitous in our environment. It's everywhere, but this is a concentrated pellet. And if the water spills, or your pet drinks it, or the children splash in it, it's non-toxic. At the end of the year, if you don't want your bucket to freeze, you just dump it out and turn the bucket upside down and go again next year. So that's one really good way. Another thing to keep in mind with your garden, and this is a little bit aside, but how many people have rain gutters?
Oh, we all do.
Okay. A lot of those gutters will collect water in them because they have a little belly. Mosquitoes only need a tablespoon of water to hatch eggs. So gutters are another thing that you want to keep flushed out and empty to try to avoid having mosquitoes hatch. You can spray for mosquitoes in your yard, and people may be sitting there saying, why do I still have mosquitoes? Well, they're hatching in the gutter above you and coming down into your yard. Mosquitoes, on the other side of the coin, have I lost the, I feel like I've lost that. Can you hear me in the back? Mosquitoes are food for hummingbirds and other small creatures. Bats depend on mosquitoes and other small insects as well. So that's all part of the habitat that you're creating in your garden. You're going to be attracting hummingbirds, which will eat some of the insects, so they're predators. Fans is another thing that you can do. You can sit out back in your garden, on your patio, and enjoy your flowers and your garden and all the insects that are coming. But to avoid the mosquitoes, you can put a small fan next to you, and mosquitoes can't fly in that breeze.
Great idea.
So it's a good way to prevent being bitten by mosquitoes. There are other kinds of things. There's a company, I think Off makes them. It's called a clip-on, and it's a little fan, and it actually has some permethrin in it, but it's not spraying it all over the yard, and it tends to, if you're working in the garden, we have a big moss bed, and mosquitoes are always buzzing around. If I put the clip on, it sort of tells mosquitoes we don't want to go near there, and they do stay away. It works. They work really, really well. And but anyway, just a quick note about lawn chemicals. 24 of the lawn chemicals that we're trying to keep our green lawns looking like a golf course, those chemicals can leach off into drinking water, and a lot of them can't be filtered out. And 33 of them are toxic to bees. And the bees that we're talking about are not necessarily honeybees. They're imported from Europe. The bees that we're talking about, and there are over 200 and some varieties or species of bees, are from the size of a gnat all the way up to the bumblebees and the carpenter bees. They're all pollinators, and we're trying to preserve them. Most of those bees are ground nesting. They don't nest in hives. So they lay their eggs in hollow stems for the winter, but they burrow into the ground. And again, they're solitary bees, so the queen will have some babies, and they'll go back and forth and feed pollen. They don't make honey. They'll feed pollen to the baby bees, and then they'll go out and pollinate the fruit trees and the vegetables in your flower garden to make the seeds that you'll be planting next year. So anyway, some of the things that we can do to keep us happy in our beautiful gardens while we're weeding and out there enjoying and smelling the flowers and making cut flowers for vases that we're bringing in. Somebody give me an idea on one of the things that we can do to prevent the pesky mosquitoes.
I actually have something you can take.
Do you?
Yes.
Good.
And this may not be for everybody. If you have like a queasy stomach, it may not be for you. I actually take oil of oregano. I take it every day during the season. Oil of oregano.
Oh, it's very good for your immune system.
It's actually an antifungal. So if you got, funky toes, you might want to take it. Now you can put that on your skin. You'll smell like a pizza, but it's all right. But it actually makes you unpalatable to biting insects. And I take it for ticks specifically because I don't want to get Lyme disease.
How much do you take?
I take 1 capsule a day. Go to Martindale's Natural Foods, and I get it there. I don't know what the dosage is. I just take 1 per day. If I take too much, it does make my stomach feel a little bad, and I just take a probiotic along with it. That's another option.
Good, thank you, Donna. Yellow jackets, and they're wasps, they're not bees, and they are aggressive, yes.
Where do you get oil of oregano? Question.
Martindale's health food store.
Couldn't you just wear oregano leaves on you?
No, you take
oil-
the tech capsule, you take it.
And
Or
how-
you could put it on your skin, I think.
No, I mean, if you just took the plant and
You could.
just pick it and
Yeah, just put some in your
that
pocket.
might work,
Well,
yeah.
there are essential oils in many of the
Yeah.
herbs and things that are in the garden, so that you might grow. So there is essential oil in oregano plant that you could use. Okay, so things that we can do, I have 2 minutes left, and we can dump all standing water, like, again, a little bottle cap. I unfortunately have a neighbor who does spray for mosquitoes, but they have a little plastic wheelbarrow which fills up with water all summer long. And I'm thinking, I don't know if they know that wheelbarrow's out there and the mosquitoes are hatching and they're still swarming their garden. Use a small fan. It doesn't have to be very big, just a small portable fan if you're sitting outside, or an overhead
Great idea.
fan if you're fortunate enough to have like an arbor and you can use that fan. Mosquito dunks, one half or 1/4 of that dunk in a bucket every month, and leave the water sitting in the bucket. If it gets too deep, you only need half full. If it gets too deep, just dump a little bit of it out, but don't change it out. The more swampy it is, the better it is. Let's see, pots of repellent plants. You can grow citronella and some other things in pots. It works, but not really well, but it helps. And then the clip-on repellents. So thank you all. If you have any questions, we'll be here to answer them.
I had a tree that was like well over 100 years old, and I sort of shared the tree with my neighbor, and my neighbor, you know, unfortunately chopped it down. But he left like a good 5 feet up in the air, stump. So there's like branches growing off of it, and it's got all leaves. Will that ever be able to like grow up again?
Not the way it was.
Thanks.
But
It kind of depends on what the species is, what tree.
Oh, it's a pin oak.
So it's never gonna have a central leader again, like it did.
Okay.
It may sprout, I don't know if this is working.
It has it has branches. It's making green.
Yeah,
You
so
know,
that's essentially what people used to do when they managed their woodlot. It's called polarity. So you could pretend like you're an ancient Celtic person.
Okay.
Now you've got a polarity tree, so you could manage it that way. So it's going to probably always have a bit of a shrubby character.
Yes.
Now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Couldn't you
Thank
prune it to have a central leader?
that would probably take. It's going to depend on how it grows. You could try that, but I bet it's probably it would be some work. Yeah.
I had a question about the water and mosquito, because I like to conserve the water that comes down off of my gutters. So I have I've got water barrels, and I even have like trash cans, because then we have those times when we don't have any water. So would it be safe, I mean, with these mosquito dunks, because I do worry about that. I'm using to water my, the plants in pots. Could you put those little mosquito dunks in there and then still just use that water to water with, and it keeps getting replenished, and that solves 2 problems? I hate to waste all that water.
I would say that some rain barrels come with a screen on the top, which helps prevent mosquitoes from entering the bucket. But yes, you can use the dunks. Depending on how big the barrel is, that's for a small 5-gallon, a quarter of that would be a 5-gallon bucket. You might want to use the whole one, and you want to use it every month. So put it on your calendar.
Thank you.
I wanted to offer another biting insect tip from my backpacking days. If you can find extremely lightweight, long-sleeved shirts, either cotton or better yet linen, or even a mesh, and you wear that while you're out gardening or doing stuff in the woods where you might encounter ticks or whatever. Like the covering protects you, but even better than that, if you want, you can dilute some mint soap or something, or oregano oil soap, I don't know. Dilute scented soap, spray it down so it's all damp, and that's going to keep you cool because it's damp, and also repel the bugs. I also wanted to ask about ways that we can convince neighbors to stop spraying. Like my neighbors across the street, every year they have the mosquito service come in. And so they saw me outside right by the curb all summer working on my pollinator garden. And the dad finally came over to me and he said that he had finally persuaded his wife to only spray in the backyard this year. But I'm thinking to myself, bugs, butterflies, birds, they don't know a house from a hole in the wall. A house doesn't stop them. So I'm wondering, what more can we do to get them to quit?
Talk.
What?
Invite them to this talk.
Yeah, they'd rather be doing soccer and baseball and all that stuff. And then one more question while I've got the mic. There's a creek, actually Little Crumb Creek, runs right through our property, and I'm wondering where can I find a test that I can do on the water to find out what's coming down from upstream in that water?
There are a couple of things, can I respond to
Sure,
this? In media, Media Bureau has been really wonderful at helping us talk about mosquito sprays, and this spring we're putting door hangers out on every single home in Media with the help, we hope, with the scouts and other volunteers. So we're trying to educate people on what, as I spoke earlier, that they're so damaging to the birds and also to human beings. They're not benign. Number two, I think there's Stroud Water in Westchester, and Stroud might be a good place to contact.
Can I interject? There's a company that's looking for volunteers to test local water. And I think what you do is you put water test in the computer, and somebody will come up and hook you up with a test kit.
Okay, and Stroud is also another wonderful place to, they've been doing water research for quite a few years.
So just to add, those door hangers that I passed down for everybody, if you contact Beyond Pesticides, if you go to their website, you can request 25 free door hangers. Do this last summer. I got the free door hangers and hung it on all my neighbors' doors. And Media Borough is now going to be doing that for the entire borough. We ordered 1,400 of those to get every single house. So we're trying to spread the awareness.
All right, next question.
Hi, so I want to know if you're starting with just grassy patch, maybe 15 feet by 10 feet or 8 feet or something like that. What's the least amount of work you can do to get this native pollinator?
You don't want to hear what I have to say. The least amount of work is to spray it with herbicide.
No, that's not what I meant, sorry.
Or you can plant into the grass.
No,
Yeah.
I'm gonna contradict you. I'm gonna contradict that. The least amount of work is to cover it up and just take time, just work with time.
Put a tarp over it.
So, yeah, you could put a tarp over it, just something that's gonna block the light. So you're just gonna kill the grass easily. So yeah, you don't have to dig, anything like that. It's gonna take a season. So you could go ahead and put that down, first in March. And then just don't let it go through that natural spring cycle. So you can kill off the grass that way. We have a red lead handouts on the table out there, and there is one about taking lawn and turning it into a garden. So that way, not backbreaking to kill the grass. Also, all that organic matter just returns to the soil. You don't want to plant into it because you're gonna forever create a maintenance hassle for yourself. So you do better off to kill all the grass. So I would allow it that enough time. It could be a hard tarp. It could be a really thick layer of mulch that you could get from an arborist company, something like that. But you just want to block out the light full season, really kill it off.
And the roots and everything will all break down like in that time?
Yeah.
Like from March to planting?
Yeah, I mean, you might test it. I would do it before the green growth gets to start, in March, and then maybe you're pulling that tarp back, come June to really see. You can kind of test it. One thing that you can also do is like really scalp it before you do that, mow it as tight to the surface as you possibly can. So scalping it can be another way of killing it off.
Especially in July or August when it's really hot.
Right.
Yeah, I've seen people mow, have someone mowing their lawn and the blade is just way too low.
Mm-hmm.
And then they basically killed because it's 95 degrees and they've done that.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on the time of year. And by the way, just so you all know, since I'm a contractor, we always are under a time constraint, and so there's really great ways of doing it, but that don't involve chemicals, but you do have to wait. And then, you know, there's also, I'm gonna put an asterisk next to that because you might need to wait a year, an entire season before everything is truly done. And it just depends on the conditions too. The best time of year that I find to cover something is you know, say April through August, because again, it's the heat of the sun that's causing really unfavorable conditions for the grass. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
I'm gonna put in a plug for Transition Town Greater Media too, because the Green Wagon Project is trying to get habitat helpers together. So people that can come out and help people get started even on little plots, so that we can all work together and help everybody have little habitats in their yard.
I'm just gonna add on one last comment. Once you open up soil, you want to try and put the plant that you want to be there in as fast as possible. So if you go ahead and get that grass killed, don't wait, plant right away. And this is back to that point I was making about plant density. When you're working with perennials and ornamental grasses, you may wanna go ahead and plant them a little bit tighter. If you're using small plants, go ahead and think about the plant density. Like if you went out to a natural meadow, if you look in 1 square foot, you're gonna see 15 plants. You know, so there's a little bit of push and pull back to not overcrowding things and just, you know, thinking about mature plants, but you might be able to just kind of take a more natural landscape approach and plant really tightly when you're working with I wouldn't do that for woody plants, but herbaceous perennials and grasses, I would go ahead and probably plant tighter, just as a maintenance thing of getting that ground covered as fast as possible. Then you're not weeding. You didn't allow the weeds to seed in.
Right, thank you.
Hello, I wanted to ask if there is, what defines a plant to be a native plant? Like, was there a timeline, like before settlers came, or what is considered native? And then, is there a way, or a list of invasive species like that we should be able to identify and start getting rid of our garden?
Yep, first question, yeah, what is native? There is a bit of a timeline, you know, so we started keeping record when white people, settlers, you know, showed up. I mean, there are some historical records, but anyway, that's a whole conversation we don't have to get into. But there's something called BONAP. So I think it's bonap.org. Do you use that website? So BONAP stands for Biotic of North American Plants. And the website is clunky. I find it hard to navigate, but what I do is if I want to know the native range of a particular plant, one of the plants you mentioned was agastache, right? So, yeah, but what you're gonna get is, so I would Google BONAP, B-O-N-A-P, and then the Latin name of that plant. This is back to knowing your nomenclature and knowing Latin names. So I would Google those 2 words and it's gonna come up. And it's gonna show you all, everything in the genus agastache. And then you're gonna start to see the ranges. You're gonna start to see Phoniculum has an East Coast range, but then there's a lot of agastaches that have a middle of the country to a western range. So again, that's gonna go off of a historical record when that, maybe it was 1700s, 1800s, whenever people started keeping record. But the good thing to notice is kind of back to what Donna was mentioning about that we're in the Piedmont, we're on the cusp of the coastal plain and the Piedmont. And what you can start to see is you start to see these slivers of native ranges of plants. So you're not just looking at that cold hardiness, you know, range. You're starting to thinking, oh, this, I can see how it's following the edge of the Appalachians, and it's okay from New York State, you know, down into North Carolina. So yeah, that's a great way. There's definitely different sources. I meant to mention this earlier. When you're doing your Google searches for different plants, I would be careful what your sources are. A great source that I would recommend is North Carolina State. they have a great, I think it's called, it's North Carolina State Extension, and it's called Toolbox or something like that.
Yeah, plant toolbox.
Right, Plant Toolbox.
Yeah, and the reason is, so another source that a lot of people use is Missouri Botanical Garden Plant Finder, but Missouri is in the middle of the country. And so their range includes a lot of prairie grasses and prairie plants that really are not gonna want our clay soil. So that's why North Carolina is a better, for us, is a better tool. So just be mindful of the source where you're getting your information. And if you have questions, then contact Redbud or contact myself or contact Transition Town Media. Yeah. Yes, next question.
So I don't think we answered your second question, the invasive. So
right.
Penn State Extension has a lot of handouts related to specific species. So again, if you start to Google a picture, there's different plant finder apps that you can have on your phone. If you start to see something and you're like, oh, just the way this is spreading, I kind of question it. So you can maybe ID it with a plant finder app on your phone, and then once you get that Latin name, you could look on Penn State Extension, and they have all kinds of handouts about identification, about how it spreads. You want to know kind of how it spreads, and that's going to give you clues on how you can take it back. So yeah, Penn State is great for that. The other one that I want to mention, so we said North Carolina State for plant information. Another great one is New Moon Nursery. So it's newmoon.com. They are one of our suppliers. They are a grower out of New Jersey, but they have a great, again, very localized information on mostly herbaceous perennials and grasses. So a lot of the woodies, you're going to get information on North Carolina State, but Newman's another great source.
And one more thing about the Penn State Extension invasive plant list. There's the current list that are plants that are designated as invasive, and then there's a list underneath that, you have to keep scrolling, that are plants that are maybe gonna make that list soon. And my recommendation is to look at both lists and identify as many of those plants as you can, because even though it's not on the list technically for this year, it might show up on the list for next year or down the road. Does that answer? Those are great questions.
Yeah, and do be careful on that stuff that's not made that list yet, because many of those plants are still sold in nurseries. So you do have to ask questions, various places that you're shopping, because yeah, many of those plants like barberry, things like that, they're still sold.
I still see it for sale, and it's on the list. It actually technically made the invasive species list, and I see it for sale everywhere. Sorry, thank you.
Actually, I guess I have two questions. I was at Lowe's. We just moved into a place in the spring. Hello. And I was looking up a bunch of the plant names, and they had the Latin names, and they were all like invasive. So, like, is there any legislation about selling invasive plants?
Peer pressure, right? So, I mean, retail stores are out to make money and sell things. I've even had conversations with the manager of a wholesaler that I work with, that I buy from. And I said, you do realize this plant is on the invasive species list? And he just, what are you gonna do, right? And so I said, well, I actually can do something, I can put some peer pressure on you. But I don't know that there is. I mean, have you heard?
There are different committees. I think that one of the state reps, and I don't remember if that's from House or Senate, had a working group. So like, it's basically gonna come from the state. So you could try and pressure your state representatives. It's really the landscape industry that's the main lobbyist against that. I don't know why they're not thinking smart, like they could sell a different plant instead. I don't know why. But anyway, that's what you could do, lobby your state representative.
And then my second question is, in all my years of living in Pennsylvania, I've never encountered this. When we turn on our backyard lights for the dogs, these like wasp creature things from hell come out of the ground and like attack our like lights all night, and they don't seem technically aggressive towards us, but I mean they'll start like banging on like the windows like a horror movie.
You might want to change your light bulb. Honestly, because it's I think it's the LED lights don't attract insects the same. So whether, even if you have it's just for motion sensor and you're not kind of, if you kind of take that approach of dark sky at night, that's really going to help pollinators. So maybe just change the light bulb.
I never see them outside of the nighttime when we turn on.
What do you think,
these
Dale?
lights. I don't.
Donna?
Are you aware?
Well, initially I was thinking cicada killer, but, and they do not sting. But I've never seen them at night, so I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, it's very.
Are they striped?
Huge,
I think
they're beetles.
They're like this big and they're like beetles.
I'm saying.
Yeah, I need to, yeah, and I'm not a bug, specialist by any means. Linda, do you have any insights here?
I don't. One thing I will say though, and adding to what I had to say, one of the most important things that you can do at night is to turn your lights out or put in yellow or low light, not the blue lights, because it affects the sleeping pattern of birds and other insects that need those nocturnal hours to sleep, just like you and I do. So it's really important, in fact crucial, trying not to have bright lights on at night. If you need security lights, the ones that will come on when someone passes by and then turn off. And I don't know what your insect is, that's mysterious to me too.
I said, get us a picture.
I do use a plant app called Seek, and it also identifies bugs and mushrooms. It's really great. It's not always accurate, but it gets you close.
Another good app for taking pictures of plants, you may not know what they are, is Picture This. And I've downloaded, excuse me, I think there's a free one, but the one you pay for is a lot better than the free one. It's not always really accurate either, and sometimes you need to take more than one photo.
Hi everyone, great presentation, thank you so much. I'm wondering, is someone going to talk about the seed bank and how that works and how we make contributions and withdrawals? Yes? Okay, all right, okay. That's all.
Thanks.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Mine's sort of a shopping question, an extension from the question about what to do after you kill your grass in a certain section. It seems to me that trying to plant with density, it seems like the best way to do that if you have 100 or 200 square foot is with a whole bunch of plugs. I found like wholesalers online that'll sell you like 100 tray plug of Rudbeckia or something like that. But I think a lot of us don't want 100 Rudbeckia. We want like 3 Rudbeckia and 3 of something else and 3 of something else and 3 of something else. Have you seen out there, or does Redbud potentially sell basically trays with variety of perennial plugs or something like that that could be more approachable for just people that are trying to fill a 50 square foot garden or something like that?
Donna's reminded me of a good point, and that I didn't get to because my list was too long for 15 minutes. You always want to plant, if you're thinking about pollinators, you want to plant at least 3 of something, so you can think about that. But I hear you don't want 100 in one plant, maybe. So yes, Redbud does offer plugs, sometimes in what we call 4-packs. So we've bought that bigger 100 tray and we've broken it down. It is one thing that we're considering for this spring to do kind of more of a variety pack. So we've been noodling on that. So that's a good reminder to me to have us figure that out. But yeah, oftentimes we can do something like a 4-pack and give you a little bit more variety. But yeah, plugs can be a great way to go, economic, not as hard labor, and like you said, to get that density and quick cover that you might be going for.
You'd have at least one customer.
Okay. And one additional piece of information about buying at least 3 plants, and I'm forgetting the square footage, but there is data that says that pollinators need to actually identify a species as food for them. They need at least, 100 or 200 square feet of one species. So I would actually recommend that you plant more than 3 of one thing, try 5. So I'll just kind of toss that in there.
That was interested in identifying the bug. If you're on Facebook, there is a site called All Bugs Go to Kevin. And post photos of bugs and they crowdsource and they're able to identify what the bug is.
That's a good one. Okay, one more question.
I just have a quick question about the dumps. Are they safe for tadpoles in a pond?
Yes.
A small pond?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all. It's Beth's turn.
Let's see. So I've been winter sowing outside for a couple of years. It's very easy. It's good for the low maintenance type gardener who doesn't want to be doing a lot of heavy work. Pretty much you just need some basic things like a packet of seeds and some kind of container that you can have at least 3 inches of soil. Plant label, of course, so you remember what you planted when spring comes. And I'm using sand to be the topping over top of the seed in this presentation. Let's see, so I just want to say, well, the thing about native seeds is a lot of them need special conditions in order to enable them to germinate. And so the winter sowing mimics the winter conditions that would normally happen for the seeds to help them be able to germinate. Different seeds have different requirements, so you can look up online to see what the requirements are for each individual seed. So the basic steps are, I guess before you start, you would want to decide what seeds you want. And we have our native seed library downstairs, so there's some options there to choose native seeds. And of course, with all the planning that you've done for your garden, you probably have some seeds in mind that you would like to plant. Some are definitely easier to grow and have easier requirements than others. For the example that I brought today, I have purple giant hyssop, which I think is generally easy to grow. When winter sowing, I like to plant the seeds really thickly, so it's not very expensive to buy the seeds. So you can be generous with the amount of seeds that you use. One of the nice things about using the native seeds is you're going to have a lot of genetic diversity in the seeds. So unlike some plants that you might buy at certain garden centers, they might be clones or cultivars. These are going to be unique plants. When they grow, they will be different from one another. So the seeds might come up at different times because of their different genetic makeup. It's something to keep in mind. So I'm just going to when you fill your container with soil, you want the soil to be moist, and you want to have enough soil in there so that it stays moist, so that you don't have to be fussing with it a lot throughout the winter time. So I've already filled mine up with, it's probably about 4 inches of soil.
Where'd you get the soil?
Thank you. Okay. I'm jumping ahead of myself. So let's see. So for the soil, I'm sort of using the guide from the Maine group, the Wild Seed Initiative in Maine, and they just recommend using organic potting soil. So you don't have to be really fussy. Whatever your favorite potting soil is, that's not full of a lot of chemicals, that's the one for you to use. Okay? So I already put some organic potting soil in here, and I've firmed the soil down so there's not a lot of air in there. And then I'm just going to put the seeds in my palm and just sprinkle that over top of the soil that I put in there.
It's a lot of seeds for a small space.
From what I've read, the native seedlings really like to be growing together with the other native seeds. They don't really like to be growing singly. And you can separate them later, in the springtime.
Yeah.
And this way I have all one type of seed in the container, so that's easier to remember and manage. So you're gonna want to, so the depth of the seed is important. You don't wanna bury the seed too deep. And a good rule of thumb is cover the seed with the amount of the width of this, equivalent to the width of the seed. So I didn't show you really well the size of these seeds, but they're very tiny. And these guys need 60 days cold moist stratification. And they also need some light in order to germinate. So usually the smaller seeds are the ones that would need light, but whenever you're planting seeds, just look up the germination requirements just so you can confirm. So for these, I'm gonna just barely cover them with some sand. The sand is just all-purpose sand, and it helps keep the seeds in place. And it also is a little bit coarse, so over the winter time it helps break through the seed coat a little bit. So, and if it should be able to let some light in as well. With these, I'm not going to cover them very much. Okay. Oops. And then, let's see. Okay, and then once you have your seeds in and your sand covering your seeds, then just I like to use a plastic plant marker because it's durable. You want it to be able to last through the season. And I recorded the name on here with a pencil. You can also use markers. Acrylic markers are good. Just something that'll last throughout the winter and tolerate moisture. And I like to put in this type of container, I like to put the label facing outwards so we can check on it later, know what I put in the pot. The Wild Seed Project recommends using 4-inch open pots and covering those with just like the metal mesh fabric, like a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch thick, just to protect the seeds from mice and other critters in your yard.
It's green?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The nice thing about this is more like a greenhouse type container, and it does help keep a little bit moisture if you feel like that's something that individual plant needs. I have also, when there's a bunch of stuff this year in the 4-inch pots with the open top. So once you put the marker in for this, just have some tape to seal around the edges, just again to keep out any unwelcome guests from getting in there. And the container before, I've used this one before, so it already has some holes in the top to allow some air and moisture in, and holes in the bottom for moisture to drain out. You don't want the soil to become too saturated over the season.
How did you put the holes in the plastic?
I have a sharp pair of shears that I used. Yeah, but there's lots of different ways to do that.
Can you explain what stratification is?
Stratification is, it's just basically giving the seed the period of time that it needs in order to germinate. So for this seed, it needs cold, and pretty much all seeds need moisture, right? The moisture penetrates the seed, and that's sort of what starts the process of the germination. But when the seeds know, they'll know based on the temperature and the light when it's time to start germinating.
So that doesn't get frozen at all?
It tolerates that, like what? Yeah, it tolerates the native seeds, unlike your garden vegetables that you maybe have tried before. These will tolerate. I have some stuff that I planted earlier, and it's already coming up under the snow, and it's totally fine.
But you cannot water, of course.
You can water from the bottom. If we have a dry spell, I would recommend watering it from the bottom. Or if it's snowy out, you can put a little snow on the top to keep it moist. You do want the soil to stay moist throughout the winter.
And you do leave open?
Yep. Yeah.
You leave the lid part open?
Yep.
Okay.
Can you repeat questions because people in the back can't hear?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's okay. You can just repeat what people are asking.
Oh, I see,
We
okay.
don't, we hear,
Oh.
yeah.
So you want it open. The question was, do you leave the top off? So you want moisture, you want the soil in the container to stay moist. This is just one example of a container. You can be creative, use anything you want as long as there's holes in the bottom and access for moisture in the top and some air.
Do you have to add moisture throughout?
You shouldn't need to, especially in a greenhouse type. If you're using an open container, then I would check it more often, to make sure it doesn't dry out.
Do you put this outside or inside, or by the
Oh,
window?
yes.
Where do you put it?
Yeah, so this is an outdoor germination process. So you want it out in the cold, in the rain, the snow, whatever's going on. With the open containers, you might want to have the dirt be a little bit lower down the sides so that the seeds don't end up splashing out if there's a downpour.
When do you transfer to like how many weeks, or March, April, when do you transfer to the soil?
Okay, yeah, so when the weather starts warming up in the spring, you want to check it and make sure it's not getting too warm in there. When you put it outside, I would initially put it out in the shade. It doesn't need sun to do the germination. It's really just going through the process of the cold and the moisture, and the seeds might be putting down roots initially. And then in the springtime, once it has at least 1 or 2 sets of true leaves, then you can take clumps or the whole thing and put it in a bigger pot, or you can go ahead and put it into your garden, whichever you prefer.
So this is just to get a head start
Yeah.
on the season?
Well, no, actually, no, the seeds need a cold period often. There are some seeds that don't. So like your mountain mint that we were talking about before, those need just warmth to germinate. So you could plant those outside in the spring. But a lot of seeds need a period of cold, moist, they call it stratification, just like a window of cold and moist period before it will germinate. Some seeds need like 2 seasons of cold moisture, like more like shrubs with berries and those types of things. But it's a great way to, if you have a big piece of land and you want to get a lot of natives in there, maybe you have a few special plants that you want to buy, larger native plants you want to buy, you can plant those and use these in as fillers, as mulch, as they were saying, you can plant them closer together.
Can you use this for trees?
Oh, sure.
Like acorns or
Yeah.
for oaks or?
Yeah, a lot of, it depends. I would definitely look up the needs of the individual plant that you're interested in growing, but like white oaks, they'll start putting down roots now. So you could still put them in a pot like this, and the main reason I would do it would be to protect it from squirrels and other animals that might want to eat the acorns. But red oaks do need a period of cold stratification. Yep, I just wouldn't plant them as densely. Maybe put 3 seeds in here, not 100. Yeah.
Did you put 100 in yours?
Probably. I don't know. I don't know how many seeds are in here. It says.
With the whole packet?
It says 1,000. I'm not sure if I already. I don't think it was 1,000. But I mean, yeah, I would plant a lot. So I fill up the whole, my whole pot.
So in your experience, what's the percentage of the seeds to come up?
It's not, yeah, right. So the viability of the seed does vary greatly. Some of it depends on how many pollinators visit the plant, how many times they visited the flowers. That will affect the germination rate of the seeds. Yeah, so that'll vary, and yeah, these, I mean, the ones from Prairie, this is ones from Prairie Moon, and theirs I've had high germination rates for the majority of theirs.
Another question, sorry, I'm very curious, that like the containers, have you ever used like milk containers?
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
sure.
it doesn't matter, it doesn't need to be clear.
It should allow some light in. It shouldn't be, opaque is fine. Yeah, it can be milk jug, so it shouldn't be like black.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. When did you plant the seedlings in the spring? Try not to plant them as individual seedlings. Take them in clumps or take the whole set of seedlings together. They don't, when you, the roots at that time are kind of fragile, so that it might slow the growth rate if you damage the roots when you're doing that. Another thing that's beneficial about growing seeds this way is you get to know what the seedlings look like when they're young, so that really helps when you have the plants in the garden and you see something coming up, you'll know what it is, you know whether you should be pulling it out or not, or to remove it somewhere else. That's been really helpful for me. Just pay attention to like the shapes of the leaves and sometimes the scent of the leaves helps with identifying them. A couple other apps to mention, the Merlin Bird app, I just want to add, is good if you're really into birds in your backyard. And iNaturalist is a place where you can post photos of insects that visit your plants, and it's also like sort of crowdsourced, so people will go on and can identify insects like your mystery night. The online resources for growing seeds and learning about germination are the Wild Seed Project in Maine, and also the Prairie Moon Nursery lists the germination requirements for a lot of different native seeds. And seed sources, one thing we didn't really talk about is, seeds are from this area are more adapted to growing in this area, and they might be better partnered in terms of timing with wildlife in this area, like different native bees. So it is beneficial to try to get locally sourced seeds if you can. A couple local sources are Toad Shade in New Jersey. They sell native seeds that are local to the ecosystem. Brandywine Conservancy usually does. I'm not sure if they're selling them this year. They have a lot of big projects going on. Hayfield in Bucks County sells local seeds. Ernst Seeds in Pennsylvania sells bulk seeds. Bonaterra in DC just started selling local ecotype seeds as well. And farther away is Prairie Moon, which is based out of Minnesota, and Roundstone Seeds in Kentucky. So there are a lot of sources of seeds. I really recommend doing it one time, just trying out for fun, if you've never done it. Oh, yeah. Well, you have one more question?
Is there some place where we can see that list you just read out?
Come to the webpage and we'll have a full list of resources. And now you'll also talk about the rules for the seed library.
What is the name of the webpage?
Yes. Oh, we'll let you know.
Oh, okay.
So downstairs we have a card catalog. We're already starting to stock with some native seeds, and we're welcoming contributions of native seeds. We have these real simple forms here that you can fill out for donating native seeds, and there's a box where you can leave them, attach the form and leave the seeds, and then we also have a little checkout form and people can take out up to 4 packets per month of the seeds. So we're really excited about this. You want to say something else?
And we hope that, when you grow them and so on, you'll take pictures of them and you'll share them with us. And this is the information that, you can write to us here. And as I say, we'll let you know when the website is on for all the information that you can have.
Okay, so we just want to thank everybody for coming out today. There are so many opportunities to help out in our green community now. We have the seed library, we have the Green Wagon Project, we have Habitat Helpers that's coming soon, we have Bee City, Media just became a bird town. We have a tree tenders group that goes out and plants trees. So we have so many different opportunities for you to get involved and so many resources of people who are so willing to lend their hand and their advice and help you out. And the community, the green community in this town is just outstanding. It's just unbelievable. So anyway, you can reach out to Redbud. You have all of our resources. We have a Green Wagon Facebook page. Transition Town Greater Media is where the seed library page will land once that's ready. So keep an eye on it. And I encourage you to get on Transition Town Greater Media's emailing list as well.
What is that?
Transition Town Greater Media.
And this is a website?
It's a website, yes, and then it has a whole bunch of different branches, so this all falls under the biodiversity group. So thank you again for coming out, and I'll let you.